What's up, everybody? What's up, MGTOW? So this video is going to be talking about my personal relationship with my ex-girlfriend for about 10, 13 years, something like that. And it's mainly inspired by English Dave's recent video on toxic relationships, although I have been thinking about doing a video along these lines for some time. But I figure, hey, now is as good as time as any to do it. And also English Dave seems to be interested in these type of topics, so what the hell. Now, for those of you that don't want to watch a long, rambly video, I'll just give you the TLDR right now, which is I broke up with my girlfriend. But if you're interested in the reasons why, then keep on listening to the video. Now, I guess to start off from the beginning, which partially is the reason why I don't know the exact length of time that the relationship went on, is because we're probably friends from about 14. Well, she was a year younger than me, so I was 15, she was like 14. And things didn't really get romantic or intimate until I was around 17. And at that point, you know, my parents were very strict, and I used to go over to her house and stuff like that. And thinking back now, well, I've thought about this before, but I think one of the main reasons why our relationship didn't work out was because our parents didn't approve of the relationship. Like, my parents are just straight up dicks, and they don't like anybody that doesn't go to their church. And I guess what happened with my ex's parents was one time I was over at her house, and like I said, I used to go over there a lot, and we were snuck in the house at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were making out and stuff, and she was topless, completely topless, and I guess her dad came downstairs. Well, he did come downstairs, but I guess he heard us, and he came downstairs, and he actually started beating her. Like, physically, not just like little, like, oh, like bad girl, but he was like literally like beating her senseless. And I didn't know what the fuck to do. You know, I was like, I'm either gonna have to kill this guy right now or I gotta leave. So I just left, because it would be kind of weird to kill her dad at that point. So I guess from then on, there was kind of a little bit of tension between me and her dad. I didn't really ever talk to her dad after that. He tried to start conversations with me and stuff, and I was just like, nod my head, shake my head. That's pretty much it. So then, of course, mistake number 2 was going to college with her, to the same college, same school, same degree, same program, everything basically the same. The only difference was that we went to different campuses in certain semesters, which is probably confusing to you, but the school that I went to had a bunch of different campuses all over the world. So at certain, like the first semester we went to school together, and then after that she went to a different campus, and I went to England, and basically it was like that. And then sometimes we'd be at the same campus, sometimes not. But whenever we were at the same campus, I would end up having to write her essays for her and do her reports. I don't know who she got to do her reports when I wasn't there. Probably some other guy that she was probably doing stuff with. I don't really fucking know. But because she had like pretty extreme dyslexia. I mean, it was to the point where I was like, how'd you even get through school? Like, how'd you even get through grade school? And it was just like, well, I'm a girl. They just passed me. And it's like, she literally couldn't form a sentence, like, in writing. Like, it was like pretty much like trying to read like hieroglyphics and then rewrite like the whole essay from start to finish, because you couldn't write a complete sentence. So anyhow, after college or whatever, like I said, her dad really didn't like me, and he was a member of some type of ski club or something like that. And through his ski club, he was able to get her a job in Colorado at a ski resort. So she moved out there, And now thinking about it was obviously because he wanted her to get away from me. And he even had tried to hook her up with some other snowboarding guys and stuff like that, but she wasn't really interested at the time. So then when I got some money saved up, then that's when I moved out to Colorado with her. And it was pretty simple living and very cheap because when we first moved out there together, she was living in a dorm that was provided by the ski resort because she was a ski instructor. And then we got this cabin that was it was in town, and it was only $400 a month between the both of us. So I was only paying like $200 a month for this cabin. I mean, it was a small cabin. It was probably like 25 by 25 feet square. There was just a room where you could fit your bed in, and then there was like the outside room, and then there was like a tiny kitchen. It didn't even have like a stove. It just had electric hobs or whatever and a little sink. Well, the problem with that place was that there was like 7 cabins on that little plot, but the plot behind it, there was these condos that they built, and the condos, were going for like $250,000 each, and there was like 6 condos stacked on top of each other, and the plot was like the same size plot as the plot where our 7 cabins were, where we were each paying $400 a month each for the 7 cabins. So we lived there for about 2 years. Then we got an eviction notice because obviously the land was worth way more than they were getting from the people that were living in the cabins. So at that point, we had to move out. And I mean, I don't know if it was racism or just because we were young, or maybe it's because I had dreadlocks, whatever the case was. I experienced a lot of harassment from landlords. A lot. So after we moved out of the cabins, we moved into these apartment where it was just like a 1-bedroom apartment, and it was in like a 3-family house. So it wasn't really an apartment, but it was like the basement and had its own door and stuff like that. And so we lived there for a while, but that was more expensive. That was like about $700 a month. I think, I can't really remember the exact, but it was like around $700 or $800 a month. And at that time, I was working at the newspaper, so I was making about $300 a week. And so it was fine. Everything was cool and stuff, and, But then, after that, basically, there was a homeowners association in that, like, cul-de-sac where our apartment was, and all the neighbors got together and decided that they just didn't want us to live there. I don't know what happened. All I did was come home from work and go in the house. I didn't hang outside the front of the house. I didn't have any friends come over, none of that. But they decided to get together, and they decided that all the people in the neighborhood decided that they didn't want us to live there. Just us, because there was young kids living upstairs from us too, in the upstairs apartment. And basically, the landlords were like, we don't give a fuck at first, but because it was a homeowners association, all the people put a lien on their house. So that meant that they would have to like pay all this extra money and stuff. And then when they put the lien on the house, they were like, you guys got to move out. So then by then, I was working at the newspaper, and I was doing some DJ stuff, but not really regularly, just mostly doing DJ lessons and doing some recording and just general music stuff like that. And then I got a job at the grocery store that my ex-girlfriend worked at as a stock guy because the other stock guy had quit or something happened. I can't remember the exact reason why they hired me, but whatever. So I was working there, doing stock, and I was delivering the newspapers and stuff like that. So when we moved out of the apartment, at that point, I was like, well, we're going to have to move into a bigger place where we have more control over the lease, and, there's not a homeowners association. And the only way to do that was to get a bunch of roommates. So from then on, after that second apartment, we had always lived with roommates, which it kind of sucks when you have a girlfriend and you're living with roommates, because it really does put a strain on when you can get intimate and things like that. So we lived in one place where we had a bunch of roommates, and then basically the landlords didn't like us there either. And then after about a year, we got kicked out of there. But all our roommates liked living with us because we don't bother people and we stay out of people's way and stuff like that. So all the roommates moved to another place. And that place it was nice, but having roommates and all that stuff, it sucks. I mean it's cool, but it sucks. And anyway, so I think by that point I had started working at the record shop too, because basically how I got involved with the record shop was my one other friend that was a DJ knew another guy that was a DJ, and all of us were actually from the East Coast. Like my one friend, he was from Florida, and the other guy was from Philly. So the whole record shop thing was pretty interesting, to say the least. I mean, it started off cool, and the guy that was from Philly, he had already put down all the money for the record shop, and he had bought all the records and decorated the place and got all the cases and all that other stuff. But what I didn't know was that all the people that were coming into the store were his friends. Like all the people that I just thought were random customers and stuff like that, they were all people that were his friends. And the other thing that I didn't know was that he was just using the store as a front for his operation that he was doing in the background. I didn't know any of this. I just thought he was like a above board kind of guy and he was trying to start a business and all that type of stuff. Which, it wasn't really that bad of an idea for a business, because there was no other record shop in town, and we didn't just sell records, we sold like clothes and snowboarding gear and other stuff, basically. And business was going good for a while or whatever, but then at some point he just kind of came to me and he was like, look man, I'm just gonna get out. He's like, you can keep all the cases and all the records and all the other stuff. I'm out. But the store had only been open for about a year, and businesses don't generally take off till at least about 2 years, and he wasn't really doing a lot of advertising and stuff like that, and I was doing a lot of advertising and promoting it and stuff like that, along with doing DJ gigs and recording and stuff like that. So at that point, I was paying about $800 a month for half of the shop. And then it got to the point where when he left, I found out from the landlord that he hadn't been paying the rent, his half of the rent, for about 6 months. So he was like, I'm out, I'm leaving. Then I went to the landlord and he was like, oh, well, you owe me a couple grand, like 3 or 4 grand. And I was like, oh shit, this is ridiculous. But I was going to keep the shop open anyway, and some money was coming in. So basically what happened was I moved out of the roommate thing, and my ex moved in with some other guy, this guy that we met, this computer guy that was renting out rooms and stuff like that, which I was kind of suspicious of, but he seemed like a pretty cool guy and stuff like that, and I went over there all the time and stuff. So basically I was just living in my car and running the record shop, and I was doing DJ gigs, which we were making about, in between 300 and 500 a week on the DJ gigs, but it was me and my friend, so we were splitting the money, but he wasn't paying rent or anything like that, and he had lived at our place for quite a while. So I guess really this is why I really subscribe to the financial hypergamy theory alongside with other hypergamy theories, but to me, the whole financial thing seems very pertinent to me, at least. Because basically, I had closed the record shop, and then at that point, I was still working at the newspaper and at the grocery store, and I was still doing DJ gigs. But then whatever happened in 2008 finally caught up with what was going on up there, and I think it was 2009, and then it was a horrible snow season. Like, there was less than half the amount of snow that it usually gets, so people weren't really coming up to the ski resorts. And I guess because of the financial crisis, which I didn't really know about then, a bunch of the businesses transferred ownership. So the grocery store that I was working at, it was owned by this lady. She didn't even live in town, and I was really cool with the manager. Like, we used to go snowboarding and stuff like that all the time, and he was really cool with me, and I was cool with all the guys that worked there. But then this really, really old guy bought the store in 2009. And they were under a lot of pressure too, because a bigger kind of like corporate health food store opened up in the next town over. And they were getting their supplies from the same place that we were getting supplied from. But since they were a bigger store, obviously they were getting the stuff for cheaper. So they completely undercut our store, and people stopped coming to our store in the first place. And then the old guy bought the store. I'm assuming that's why the lady sold the stores, because that other store opened up. And then they're undercutting us, and plus, the 2008 crash. And then, again, I don't know if it was racism, or maybe it was just because of how I look and how I dress and how I talk. Who knows? But when this old guy bought the store, his first order of business, before even talking to anybody that worked at the store, was he fired me and the other black guy that worked in the kitchen. That was the first thing that he did. Before even talking to the staff, talking to any of us, he just fired me and the other black guy. And I mean, the guy was like 80 years old, and he lived in the mountains in Colorado. Maybe we can chalk this one up to racism. Just maybe. So, before this happened, before I got fired from that job, after I had stopped the record shop, I was still doing DJ gigs, and I was still working at the paper. I decided that moving around and having landlords harass us and stuff like that was not cool anymore. And we basically, well, it was my idea, but basically to move into a rent-to-own place. Because, I was tired of moving around, and, we didn't have any credit. I've never had a credit card or anything like that, so I don't have credit, so I couldn't get like a mortgage or anything like that. And she didn't have credit, so she couldn't get a mortgage. So we decided to move into this rent-to-own place. And again, the landlord was a complete dick. Like, the first probably like 6 months that we lived there, he kept coming to the house to like check and like look around the house and make sure we weren't doing anything, even though shit is legal there, which doesn't make any fucking sense. And we were buying the house, but he still wanted to check up on us. I think that's a problem with the kind of late Gen Xers and millennials, is that the people that are in the early Gen X and baby boomers just look at us like we're kids, even though we're not. I don't know if it's the food or whatever, but people just look younger nowadays. I don't know what the fuck it is. But in any case, so we moved in there, and then I had been working at the paper for a long time, and, I knew all the routes, and I mean, I would say that I was one of the most reliable people there at the paper. They actually gave me a second route to do the Spanish-speaking newspapers. And I mean, I remember having to deliver papers one day. Well, I didn't have to, but I was just so used to doing it that there was probably about 3 feet of snow on the road. And I just knew the road so well that I just delivered the papers. I mean, it was to the point where I had a Jeep. Well, I had a Chevy Blazer, and the snow was coming up over the hood of the car, from driving through the snow. It was just like, and nobody else delivered papers that day. But then all of a sudden, this guy showed up and he got a manager job there. And like, I'd never seen the guy before. He just got hired directly into a manager position because he had a wife and kids. And I was kind of pissed off about that because I didn't even hear about the manager for the paper route position, even though I was probably one of the few people that knew every paper route in town. I knew where every paper box was in the entire county. And then, well, anyway, that guy, basically, who I guess they just assumed he was responsible because he had a wife and kids. Well, about a month or two after he got hired, his wife divorced him and then he just quit. And so I was really pissed at that point because I was like, I've been working here for like 3 years and it's ridiculous. So one day my manager calls me up from Denver, which is like a 2-hour drive away from where we lived. And he's like, oh, I got really drunk last night. I'm still hungover. He's like, can you do my route? And I was like, fine, that's cool. Whatever. Deliver the papers in negative 32-degree weather for you. And then the next day when I came in, he had written me up for not counting the papers in the paper box. Now, mind you, it was negative 32 degrees weather. I didn't have a heater in my car. And basically, I was just eyeballing the amount of papers because it's like you're supposed to put in an exact amount of papers. Like each paper box, they take a record of how many papers people put in the paper box. And instead of, counting 7 papers, I was just like, all right, that looks like 7 papers. Whatever. It was negative 32 degrees. Sue me. You know what I'm saying? And the fact of the matter was that a day before you called me telling me that you were too drunk and hungover to do your route and I did your route for me, and then you're going to write me up for not counting papers. I was like, fuck this. I'm out. So at that point, I still had the DJ gigs and a bunch of stuff from the record shop, which I was using basically to pay the rent and buy food for the dog and stuff like that. Because I would basically just drive down to Denver with a bunch of like records and clothes and different stuff and sell that stuff out of the back of my car. And then basically what happened with the DJ stuff was that, again, somebody bought the club that was in town because there's only one big club in town. And because of the fact that, whatever happened in 2008, some other guy bought the club. And he was just this young kind of asshole guy. And we were doing gigs and stuff. And it's really kind of a complicated story. But in short, we were doing a bunch of gigs and stuff like that. And we were bringing a lot of business to their club. Like, for instance, the time that we opened for Black Sheep, when we performed, the club was full. There was like 300-400 people in the club. And then when Black Sheep went on, everybody left because they didn't know who Black Sheep was. And we were like, oh shit, it's Black Sheep. And we tried to hang out with them after the show and all this other stuff, but it's another story. And we had our own beer sponsorship too, which was a pretty big beer company. Most likely, if you go to your local beer store, they have that type of beer. And so we used to bring our own keg that was worth about $250, $300 because it was like high-end beer. We would bring our own keg and give that to the bar to sell. So they were getting free beer from us. And they were only giving us like 2% of the bar earnings on a night when they would have been closed, and we got the club full, and then they sold like $10,000 worth of liquor and beer and stuff like that, and we were getting 2%. And because we wanted to get people to keep coming to our shows so we could sell CDs and stuff like that. We were like, look, you got to stop charging at the door or something like that. And since we were the only people that were doing it, it was just me and my friend. When we were actually on stage one night, then my ex comes down and she was like, hey, they're charging people at the door. So they literally waited for us to go on stage, and then they started charging people to come in when we told them, and then they didn't give us any of the money from the door. So after that, we kind of brought contracts, and the guy wouldn't sign the contracts, and we had done gigs at some other clubs and stuff like that, but basically that was the biggest club in town, and we were making about $200 per show doing that. So basically, after all that shit happened, I was really struggling to pay my half of the rent in this place that we got, this rent-to-own place and stuff like that. And I was trying to get the farming going, and I had a bunch of bins in my back porch with like food growing in it and stuff like that. And basically that, it was just about cutting it, but it wasn't really. And so that's the point in which I was like, look, I gotta look for a job like somewhere, because I can't get hired out here, because like I said, all these people are complaining about, freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and I've been experiencing that for quite a long time, because the main employers obviously in a ski town are the ski resorts. And again, like I said, I don't know if it's racism, but just for some reason, they decided that people with dreadlocks couldn't work at the ski resorts. And at that point, I had dreadlocks for religious purposes, because in the Bible, it says that you're not supposed to cut your hair. And that's why Jewish people have those little like curly things on the side, because you're not supposed to cut your hair. So anyway, I was like, whatever, because at first when I moved out there, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, I'll work at the ski resort. It's the biggest employer. There's 5 separate ski resorts, but they all had the same rule. You got dreadlocks, fuck you. So anyway, I couldn't work there, couldn't work at the paper, which was a private thing. They were cool with the dreads, but obviously whatever had happened, and couldn't work at the grocery store, and there wasn't really much else out there. I had started doing an apprenticeship with this one guy who was a glass blower, and that was making probably like $20 for like doing like 6 or 7 hours worth of apprentice glass work, which basically I was making like drink stirrers and some other little tiny ornaments that were simple to make. But I mean, just looking at the amount of time that it would have taken to learn how to blow glass pipes and do vases and stuff like that, it would have took years to learn how to do that. So I was like, this isn't going to work out either. And like through the whole time in between jobs, or when I lost the jobs, I was doing all types of odd jobs. Like I said, I did chimney sweeping and window cleaning, and did gardening with this one chick where she had me like pulling weeds and doing stuff at these condos that she had contracts with. And I was doing the gardening, and we were doing gardening in town. I think I might have talked about this before, where basically there was supposed to be this community garden where, low-income families could get healthy food from and stuff like that. And I helped them build the garden from the ground up. I built the raised beds. I did all this stuff, because a bunch of old people and women. So I was like one of the few guys there. They had me carrying around logs and all this other stuff. And then basically, because I didn't hang out with the group, they thought that I wasn't there, but I was there. And they had this sign-in sheet where you're supposed to sign in when you come to the garden to work on your plot or whatever. And I signed in. So what had happened was, because I wasn't hanging out with them, they ripped up my garden plot. and gave it to Girl Scouts. So obviously I couldn't go down there and, rip up the Girl Scouts garden plot, because that would just make me a complete asshole. But anyway, they never even looked at the sign-in sheet because they were just all cool with each other, and I wasn't cool with them. So finally I, talked to them, and I was like, check the sign-in sheet. Tell me I wasn't there. And then they were like, oh, we're so sorry. You can have a garden plot next year. I'm like, bitch, I'm starving to death right now. Like, I don't have any fucking food in the house. I'm like spending all my money on rent. Like, I don't have any food. My ex wasn't helping me out at all. As soon as, I stopped working, she started eating out. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, the shit is ridiculous. So it's like, okay, fine. So that's when I was like, look, I'm out. Like, I'm out. Like, I told her straight up, I was like, look, I'm out. I'm done. Like, I can't find a job out here. You want to live out here so bad. You care more about living out here than you care about me. And it was like, yeah, basically, I've made the decision to live out here. I'm eating organic food. I have a great job. I have great jobs, like several jobs. Although she did quit the health food store because, again, after that guy bought the store, she worked there for a couple months, and then he started sexually harassing her. At least that's what she says, which I do believe her at that point because I had seen that guy in the store before. He was trying to hit on her and stuff. So basically, she had this job, basically she had scammed her way into this $45 an hour job because she was working for this babysitting pimp. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it, because it was this lady that was organizing babysitters for people that were coming up skiing, and she was charging $50 an hour, and then she was giving the girls $35 an hour. And they signed a no, whatever it is, like a no, whatever agreement where they're not allowed to contact the clients outside of her. But because she's such a charismatic person, one of these super rich people that could afford to pay $50 an hour for babysitting, they contacted her anyway. And they're like, oh, our kid likes you so much. We want you to be our full-time, like, au pair and house cleaner. So she got this job where she was making $45 an hour. And I used to go up there with her. These people lived on like a 50-acre ranch, and it might have been more acres than that, but I mean, I could only see 50 acres. And basically, they had already cleaned up the house. All she had to do was put some dishes in the dishwasher, change the bed sheets, and wipe down this giant mirror that they had in their exercise room with a squeegee. It took about like an hour, but she had a minimum of 4 hours per thing. So you can see, and then they were coming up there like every week. And then on top of it, they wanted her to be full-time like babysitter for her kid. And I guess when she started to get exposed to that type of lifestyle and seeing these married people, and all of her cousins were getting married, and on top of that, her friend had moved up there because her friend was from Jersey too, and she was from the hood. Like, she's from Irvington, and she only dated rich guys. And basically what had happened with that was that my one friend that I worked on music with, that he was just kind of doing it as a side thing. His girlfriend, my friend's sister, which is a girl from the hood, and my ex, they all started to get together and have these like meetings. Oh yeah, and there was this other girl, this fucking Jewish girl from New York City. And they all started getting together and having these like girls meetings and stuff like that. And then the one, I mean, none of them had bad boyfriends. Like the one Jewish girl, I mean, her boyfriend, he was like a carpenter, he worked full time. And then the other girl from the hood, her boyfriend was a computer programmer, and he was making like apparently millions of dollars because he was doing some type of HR program, some automated HR program. And then the other guy that I was working on music with, he was a millionaire because he was from Philly, and his grandpa owned some law firm or some shit like that. I mean, he was driving a brand new Audi. But they all got together, and then one after another, they all broke up with their boyfriends. And the Jewish girl, she moved back to New York City and married a lawyer. The other girl was like, I don't know if she broke up with the guy, but she basically admitted that the only reason why she was with the guy was for money. And then the other girl that lived with my friend that was working on music with, he lived with his mom, which was kind of weird but they were so rich that he had like his own separate like area, like his almost basically his own condo, like in the basement of their place. And she wanted him to move into the rental condo that they owned, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to live with his mom. So she broke up with him, and then, I broke up with my ex because she was basically doing a lot of crazy shit. Like I think I've talked about this before too, because she was talking to this guy that was the mayor of the next town over. Like, he was the actual fucking mayor of the town. And he was like hitting on her all the time. Like, apparently he would drop her off at the house and be like, oh, I want you to break up with so-and-so. And the only reason why she wasn't into him is because he was like almost 60 years old, which was just a little bit too old for her at the time. We were in our late 20s. So, and his daughter was older than her. But still, she was hanging out with him. He was giving her money and stuff and all types of weird shit that I really wasn't comfortable with. But at that point, like, what could I say? She was hanging out with him, going skiing and all this other shit. And I mean, it got to the point where, I bought a shotgun. I had like a 6-shot, 12 gauge and a 9. And I was like, if this fucking guy says some dumb shit like that, and then I'm sitting here thinking, like, I can't just like murder the mayor of a fucking town. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the type of position that I was in, where it's like, this guy's hitting on your girlfriend and he's a mayor of the fucking town, the next town over. And you're like literally making like the decision, am I going to have to shoot this guy if he comes to my fucking house and starts talking all greasy and shit to my fucking, you know what I'm saying? Like, the mental state that you get put into when you're in that situation, it's not good. It's not fucking good, because you're sitting there with a fucking gun, loaded gun, like, okay, let this motherfucker come to the house and say some shit like that to my face. Like, I'm not that type of person. Like, generally speaking, like, that's not how I want to live my life. So, there was a lot of shit like that where, like, for instance, like, she took my dog to town. And my dog, I mean, it was half pit bull, half Labrador retriever, because it was like all black looking pit bull kind of dog. And that dog was strong as fuck. I mean, I used to ride around town with him on a skateboard. I had like a harness and stuff like that. And he would pull me for miles. Like, that dog had like infinite energy. She couldn't handle the dog. So she took the dog to town one day, and apparently the dog bit some girl in the face, like some little, like, small, like, not a toddler, but, a fucking small girl. Bit her in the face. She had to get 7 stitches. And then my ex was like, oh, you got to pay these hospital bills. You got to pay for this girl's stitches. And she was trying to blame it on me. She was trying to blame her taking the dog that she couldn't control to town and having the dog bite somebody on me. And then, like, there was like this one time we went to the bar and she tried to start a fight with like the biggest guy in the bar. Like, I mean, the guy was like, had to be like 6'2", 6'3", like he looked like he was like over 300 pounds. She just like punched him in the back of the head, and he turned around and looked at me, and I was like, look, bro, like, if you want to fucking fight, we can do this shit. And he was like, he just looked at me and looked at her, and I was like, he could tell I fucking wasn't stupid enough to fucking punch like a fucking football player in the back of the head. And then there was this other time where me and my friend were at the studio, not the dude that I was doing the DJ stuff with, but just the guy that was doing music on the side. And we got a call, and they were like, "Oh, you got to come over here right now," because they were at the bar. His girl, and my girl were at the bar with low cut tops on, getting free drinks, right? And then these guys wanted to fuck them, and they had left the bar, and the guys followed them out of the bar, and they were in the parking lot, and like the one guy, my friend, he's only like 5'4", so it was like just basically me and these two guys, and they're trying to holler at my girl and his girl, and I fucking rolled up on him. I was like, "Look, bro," I was like, "You gotta get the fuck out of here. Like, what the fuck?" I was like, "You could see these girls are uncomfortable." Like, I was like, and they were like, they just backed down and shit, because I was like, they could tell I wasn't fucking around and shit. But there was just a lot of situations like that where it was like, why the fuck is this happening? Why are these guys always around? And it just got to a point where I was like, okay, I got no job. My ex is going to hang out with guys all the time. She's getting money from guys. She's getting this and that. And, didn't make any sense to me. And it was like, I'm just basically in the house, with a gun, waiting for somebody to do some stupid shit. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. So that's why I was like, all right, I'm out. And I left, and I went back to my parents' house for a little while, and, I lived with my brother, and then got my own apartment and stuff like that. But in the meantime, basically, the first maybe like 4 months or so after I left, she was calling me all the time. Like, she was calling me, "Oh, I still want to be with you, and what happened, and da 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 da." And, I was like, telling her, "Look, I'm looking for a job," and all this other stuff. And, she was like, "Oh, it was a mistake." And, I was telling her about all the shit that had happened, and like where I was at with, that guy coming over, the mayor guy, and all this other shit. And she was like, "Oh yeah, he's an asshole," and da 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 da, and this and that. And basically, from all those phone calls for like about 4 months or 4 or 5 months or so, it got to the point where I was like, all right, fine. Like, if you still want to be with me, then, come out here. Like, I'll buy you a plane ticket to come out here. And it just happened to be on my birthday. And at that point, I guess somewhere in between the point in which we planned to meet up and get back together, and when she came out, she started talking to her little sewing circle of friends, and I guess they told her not to get back with me. And so she didn't tell me that. So then when she came out there, and then she was like, "Oh, I don't want to be with you anymore." So basically, I just ended up paying for her to have a plane ticket to go and visit her family. And like, yeah, I mean, we had some breakup sex or whatever, but it was just like, what the fuck happened? Like, you were the one that was calling me and telling me that you want to get back together with me, and then I pay for you to come out here, and then now you want to break up with me and shit. And then at that point, like, all the supposed friends that I had, guy friends that I like grown up with, they were all calling her. Like, the one friend that was from the fucking hood, whose sister had lived out there too, he had lived out there for a while. Then he moved back to Jersey. And then when I broke up with her, he was planning a trip out there. And then there was this other guy that she had met in college, and he was always calling her. And then as soon as I broke up with her, he was planning a trip to meet her in Colorado. And like, I found out that one of my friends that I grew up with, he was a person that drove her out to Colorado, because obviously he thought that he was going to get something because I wasn't around and shit. And like, basically everybody that I was friends with was either not around anymore, or they were trying to get with my ex. And I was just like, yo, this is some fucking crazy shit. Like, like, you were just hanging around with me to wait for the relationship to end so that you could holler at my ex-girlfriend? Like, get the fuck out of here. So that's when I just completely was like, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not friends with anybody. I'm not fucking with my family, my cousins, my brother, none of these people. Nobody. And I just, basically from that point, I lived in an apartment by myself. I didn't even have any furniture. I just had a futon. That was it. And I had my futon and a computer, and I didn't have furniture. I didn't have, I didn't have a refrigerator. So it was pretty much just like living like that. And that's basically what had happened. So, I mean, to say that it was a toxic relationship, I don't know if that was the case. I would say that more that it was somewhere in between the parents not approving of it and not being supportive, which seems to be something that's very important if your parents approve of the relationship, if you have parents, and a complete lack of guidance from any adult because of the fact that since they didn't approve of it, then they're not going to like help you tell you what to do to like make it work. So like her parents never said anything to her and my parents never said anything to me. I mean, my dad was so uptight about talking about sex that I didn't even never got a birds and the bees talk. One day he called me into a room and I thought he was going to do a birds and the bees talk, and he sat me down all serious like, and he had his like white tee on and he was all serious, and I was like, oh man, this is it. He's going to give me the male info. And you know what this guy said to me? He looked me dead in the eye and he was like, respect women. That was it. That was my birds and the bees talk, was respect women. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, he didn't tell me any, like, oh, you got to do this, and women are like this, and this is like that. None of that. None of that. It was just like, they didn't want the shit to happen, so their best bet was to just not give me any information about the situation. No guidance, no like, oh, well, you're going to need this at this point, and, girls are looking for this, and women are looking for this, and you're going to need this, and you're going to need to be here by this time, and none of that shit. They're just like, basically like, well, we don't like this person, so fuck you, you're on your own. And like I said, like I did what I could, I was working the whole time and treating her right and, eating the organic food that she wanted to eat, which was another huge financial problem because that shit is too expensive. And that was a problem all on its own. And then, so throughout the whole relationship, basically, I had quit smoking cigarettes because I started smoking cigarettes when I was like 12. And so I quit smoking cigarettes when I was 18 to about 29, 30. And then after that, all that shit happened, I was just like stressed out in between that and having to look for jobs and, going out to the bar, drinking with my friends and stuff like that. I started smoking cigarettes again, which maybe, I guess that is a bad outcome from a relationship ending like that and stuff like that. But now I'm on the vaporizer, so it's a little bit better, but still smoking. But in any case, yeah, I think that, you could say it's a toxic relationship, but I think that all relationships have, ups and downs and stuff. But it's just like when nobody in the community around you is supporting your relationship, you got your girl's friends are telling her to break up with you, and your parents are not really giving you any guidance or advice, and your guy friends are trying to fuck her, and other people in town, it's like, and you're just by yourself. You have nobody's there backing you up. It does put a lot of pressure on you, and it becomes very difficult to maintain a relationship in an environment like that. So yeah, this has probably gone on long enough, but hopefully you guys got something out of it and get the fuck out of the relationship before it's too late. And have a good day and go MGTOW.